Okay, I think we're set.
Okay, are we ready to go?
Yep.
I think the first thing we need to do is take a poll who has Zoom fatigue. I don't know if I'm the only one, but so ready to see you guys in person. But before we get started, as you know, I must remind everybody that you're advised of your duty under the State Ethics and Government Act to avoid conflicts of interest and the appearance of conflict, and are instructed to refrain from participating in any matter coming before this committee with respect to which there's a conflict of interest or an appearance of conflict. Does anybody have a conflict? Okay. You have received the minutes from the January 13 meeting, and if everybody's had a chance to look at that and there are no discussion or changes necessary, I would entertain a motion that they be approved.
So moved. So moved. Second.
All right, all those in favor? Oh, there it goes. There's the poll. All right, so that motion carries. All right, so we have currently 4 subcommittees that are working very, very hard. And so I'm going to call on first the chair. I think Alan, is Alan with us? Alan Cobb?
Yes, ma'am.
All right, to give us a report on the subcommittee on compensation of court-appointed defense counsel. I believe you guys met on April the 9th.
We did. Thank you, Marcy. And hello to everybody. I need to first apologize for missing the January 13th meeting. I went to every other meeting that I was supposed to go to and just absolutely forgot. So I'm very sorry about that. And thanks, Alex, for standing in. I understand you did a great job. Thanks again. So I've got a little report compiled. I'll just start with saying that, as you all probably know, in 2011, the General Assembly drastically cut the rates of compensation for private appointed counsel. Consequently, we began to see attorneys drop off the list, and the quality of representation began to falter, and the whole system started to feel a strain. Concern arose whether the reduced rates and the reduction of attorneys was impairing the ability of private appointed counsel to comply with the rules of professional conduct and effectively represent their clients. The purview of our organization thus became involved, and I believe that's the reason that this subcommittee was created. I think Darren had a lot to do with that also. He is a high-ranking member of the Indigent Defense Service organization. So you did appoint this subcommittee. I want to say we have incredible members on the committee. All of them are primarily criminal lawyers and know exactly what they're talking about. And Alex and Jennifer have done an outstanding job assisting us in any way that we needed. So we started by working with other stakeholders, the Indigent Defense Services, the School of Government, and other people with opinions weighed in. We brainstormed how we could help, knowing we could not lobby the General Assembly for specific increased funding. So we tossed around a position paper, or a white paper, and various other ideas, but we decided on a survey of criminal attorneys, which would be analyzed, tweaked, and in final form be helpful and appropriate for the state bar. It would lend our imprimatur to those organizations and policymakers at liberty to advocate for change in the compensation rates, such as the Chief Justice, the IDS, the General Assembly itself. You should have a copy of the survey that was attached. So we came up with a Microsoft Forms survey, which is a branding survey that changes based on how each question is answered. We feel it will end up being a specifically targeted survey of those respondents who are actually affected and yield relevant results. It's anonymous. But if one desires, she or he can provide personal information for further contact. Now, we propose running a pilot test by distributing to a small subset. We suggest that all board certified specialists in federal, state criminal law and all specialists in criminal law juvenile delinquency be in that small subset. That would be less than 200 people, we believe. And we would give the respondents a 10-day response time. If the exercise passes muster by the committee, we propose then sending it to all the full bar membership with a 15-day response time. We are set and ready to proceed and respectfully seek your consideration and suggestions. And I'm happy to try to answer any questions. But first, Alex, do you have anything to add to what I just said?
I don't have anything to add. I think you summed it up pretty well. And I thank you for your kind words and your work on this as well.
So does the larger group have any questions or comments?
I have a question. Charles Roundtree from Edgecombe County. We're having a district bar meeting this evening, and one of the issues is criminal defense appointed counsel. Do I have permission to bring this up to my district meeting tonight and discuss it with the leaders of the bar?
I think I would have to defer to you, Marcy, on that.
Alice, seconds. Any reason why not?
It's everything that occurs in this meeting is public information. I think it would be great to let the folks in your bar know about this, Charles. I think you should tell them that there's going to be a preliminary survey that's going to be a small group of criminal lawyers to start out with before it's disseminated more broadly. But I think the hope is, and Alex and Ellen, you correct me if I'm wrong, but the hope is that once we send the survey out to the membership as large, is that we'll have as much participation as possible. So letting folks know in advance, I think, is a great idea.
I agree.
Yeah. Alan, I'm sorry, you probably said this. How many do you envision the pilot survey going to? How many?
I think probably less than 200. Alice, I know that you mentioned how many you thought were involved in those two groups combined.
You know what? I'm not the director of specialization anymore. Brian is. So Brian can probably tell you more accurately. I think it's like something south of 400, which would be the criminal law and the juvenile defenders. But Brian, correct me, it may be smaller than that. Smaller group.
Yeah, I'd say the list of criminal law specialists is, I believe it's south of 300, maybe just over, between 200 and 300. Juvenile defenders is an even smaller group. I believe it's 20 or less.
Okay. Are any other questions or comments? And does it require any type of a motion for them to send the survey? Do they need anything else from our subcommittee to?
Hey, Marcy, this is Eben.
Hey, Eben.
I just want to thank Alex and Jennifer for their great work there for pulling together the form and substance of this survey. They have been awesome. And so props to you, Alex and Jennifer, both of you. Great work and just phenomenal survey. I think we're going to get some good results back once we get it out to the bar.
We do appreciate everybody's hard work, staff and for the committee members. But I guess.
Marcy, could I?
Yes, Darren.
This is Darren.
Yeah.
I'm in the car. I apologize, but some of the things that I think are important for us to know is that this survey could get some real legs for us, because the governor has in his budget recommended an amount of money, recurring money to IDS, and that could possibly bring back complete rate restoration. Now, we are not, at IDS, we're not anticipating that we're going to get that full allotment, but at least we finally got the governor governor's office to at least look at that as a need. And so we're hopeful. The other thing is we're in dire need. Not you got. I don't mean to sound like a broken drum, but it's we got an email last week from IDS seeking attorneys to Catawba County's district because they don't have enough. They've got like 4 lawyers who are handling high-level felonies, which are A through D felonies, and their IDS is pleading for lawyers who do court-appointed work outside of that district. They'll pay mileage and all that. I mean, we're in a real dire need for that. But I think that the survey could really help us with the legislature, especially with them having the governor's budget up there at this point in time. So I just wanted to let everybody know that, maybe we are making some progress, and maybe with the help of this survey, we can get across the finish line.
Thank you, Darren. So do we need a motion? Obviously, the survey needs to go out as soon as possible. Alice?
So, Marcy, it's kind of an interesting question, but in my mind, I don't know that we want committees or subcommittees kind of deciding to use the name of the state bar to do surveys unless it's kind of gone up the chain, and making sure that the council supports doing that, using the state bar name for a survey. So my recommendation would be to have a motion from your committee and then for you to present it to executive tomorrow to make sure there's approval for proceeding.
Okay, does anybody make that motion?
So moved.
Moved. Second.
There's a motion and a second, so we need a vote. All right, looks like we have a unanimous. Are we done voting? I'm sorry. Am I going too fast?
Nope, we're good.
I'm sorry. Okay, so yes, that carries 18-0. All right, Alan, thank you again, you and your committee and the staff for all your hard work. Sounds like it's a very urgent need. Okay, our next report would be on the subcommittee to study and propose regulatory change. And I believe Mark Enriquez, are you with us? Can you give us a report, please?
I'm with you, and I'll be happy to give you a report. Great to see everybody again. We've had 2 meetings of the committee to study regulatory change since our meeting in January. We met on January 26th, and we focused on Arizona. We heard from Dave Byers, who's the administrative director of courts. They've made a number of changes in Arizona in changing some of the rules, allowing alternative business structures, and doing a new licensed paralegal program. You can read more about that in the minutes from that meeting. I'm happy to discuss it further. I know many of you attended that meeting. And then we had another meeting last month, March 23rd, where we really focused on the idea of limited licensure for paralegals. We heard a lot about the program they have on limited license paralegals in Ontario. That's a program that's been around for a number of years and has been pretty successful by most reports. They've got a lot of paralegals all functioning in a fairly limited range, although it's not that limited, but it's they handle small claims hearings, they handle a very limited criminal representation, a lot of administrative issues and immigration. They don't do family law, but they do a lot of other types of things, including some court appearances there. And they've got 9,400 licensed paralegals in Ontario. So it's a pretty big program. We asked a lot of questions about how they've run it, how they've licensed it, whether they need to have insurance, what kind of examination they have. Again, there's a lot of material. They gave us a very good PowerPoint presentation that is in the meeting materials here. And then we also had a presentation from a group of paralegals that are here in North Carolina. They've put together a proposal that was submitted to the Chief Justice and also submitted to our committee about, and they call themselves the North Carolina Justice for All Project, but they are advocating for the idea of paralegal licensure to do a number of things in specific categories, including family law, landlord tenant, certain types of administrative law, expungements in the criminal area. And they gave a very good presentation that is also in your materials, where they outline the kinds of things they would like to see, excuse me, in terms of licensure here. And we had a good discussion with them at the end of that meeting. I do think there are a number of issues from a practical standpoint, including whether we would need to change the definition of practice of law under the current statute to do a lot of the things they're asking for, which is obviously not under our immediate control. Also, although, as you know, we have a certified paralegal program, it's a big jump to go from a program that certifies paralegals to actually creating a licensure process with a separate exam and regulation and everything else that would entail. But I think it's fair to say that our committee found the ideas interesting. It is an interesting approach. There certainly are areas where there is a high need for, that lawyers are having difficulty meeting. And so the idea of some kind of limited licensure to meet those needs, is appealing. And I think that's something that we're going to continue discussing, but may well make some recommendations on, at the end. We're going to have a few more meetings going forward. My plan is to send out a survey to our committee reviewing, for those of you who've been paying attention, I think we've covered 8 or 9 different potential regulatory changes from, restrictions on business ownership to changing definitions of what authorized practice is to limited licensure. Also things like court navigators, which have found success in New York and other places, and really try to see where we as a committee what areas we think are worth further study and begin moving towards preparing a report. My goal is to have a report to you probably October. If we could do one in June, that'd be great. I'm not sure we'll be done by then, but certainly by October, kind of have a report with recommendations from the subcommittee in terms of what we've learned and what areas we think are worth further study by this group. So there's, again, that's the highlight reel of the 2 meetings. You can see the presentations and a lot of the content in the agenda to the thing. And I'm happy to answer questions or discuss more particulars with anybody here in this group.
Okay, are there any questions for Mark or his committee members? Mark, I guess you got your committee members are on call as well.
Yeah, most of them are here. So many of you have sat through those other meetings and have those details, but happy to field questions from people that may not be on the on this subcommittee. If you've got questions about what we're hearing or thoughts or any questions you want us to pose back to some of these presenters or things we should be exploring. All right, I don't hear any questions, so
there's no further comment. Is that your report, Mark?
Yes, that's a report from the subcommittee to study regulatory change.
And we do appreciate it. I know you've been at this a long time. This is not easy. Thank you and your committee and staff.
My pleasure.
Right, moving right along. Our next committee is chaired by Todd, and I see Todd. Hi, Todd. And this committee is on diversity and inclusion, and we would love to hear from you. I believe that, Todd, your committee met, I believe, on February the 16th. Is that right?
Good afternoon. Thank you, Madam Chair. We have met several times and have another meeting scheduled tomorrow, actually. The committee, for those who don't know, grew out of what continues to be some challenges in the racial equity and social justice issues in this country. Obviously, everybody knows the George Floyd trial is going on as we speak, actually. Luckily, the State Bar has been chipping away at increasing diversity and inclusion over years. I think the progress has been slow, but we continue to work at it. And I think the current subcommittee grew out of, in part, some of the developments last summer, but mainly, I think it's fair to say that, the timing was right. The time continues to be right. And as a result of that, last summer, the officers and the LAP board officers had some discussions, which led to the appointment of this subcommittee. And for those of you who don't know, the charge basically is to study and review diversity and inclusion issues and to make recommendations to the issues committee about items that the council may consider in terms of implementation, things of that nature. So we've had some good meetings. As Marcy said, we met first on January 12, had sort of an organizational meeting at that point, and had a real good turnout. After, as I said, it's a sensitive topic, but the dam broke after a couple of our mature counselors sort of put the issue in the room, and we had a very robust discussion about where we are at the state bar, how we can improve, and some of the ways we can improve. And so I think it's fair to say that the folks who attended that meeting came away very encouraged that we understand the issue, we understand the challenges, but the counselors and the officers are committed to moving forward. And I do want to give a good quick shout out to Leonore and to Carmen, who have been very, very, very helpful and, quite frankly, taking the laboring oar at pushing this ahead. So I don't want to go forth without acknowledging their good work. So there's sort of consensus that we need to do this, and that consensus that we need to study what's going on in our own space and study what's going on in some other bars from which we can learn some things. And so we had a second meeting on February 17th with Dana Cutler, who is the past president of the Missouri State Bar, similar in size to ours, but they're a hybrid bar, part volunteer, part mandatory. And they went through a similar study and process a couple of years ago. And so the subcommittee and a lot of the officers and others met with her. We sort of basically had a conversation with her for about an hour. It was right after the big storm in Texas and everything was frozen. And I believe she was working on generators when she hopped on the Zoom call with us. But she was very, very helpful, very, very enlightening, and very, very spot on with some of her recommendations. She talked to us about how the events in Ferguson, Missouri, a couple of years ago sort of lit a fire within the bar there, and how I guess she said there was a combination of the governor and the bar and a lot of others putting together what was called a Ferguson Commission to study diversity, equity, and inclusion out there. And one of the things that grew out of that was a subcommittee on diversity that studied some of the issues that we're looking at right now. They also looked at issues of implicit bias, which, although not specifically within our charge, depending on who you talk to, we certainly believe that it is. It is certainly relevant. I think it's fair to say that the science has proven that we all have implicit biases, and we just need to learn how to interrupt them as needed. And so we looked at that and talked with her about that, and she gave us some really good ideas about how we should go about this process, what worked out there, what may work here. And so that was part of our study and process. And we've continued to stay in touch with her to try to make sure that as we go down this road, she may give us some ideas that and help that may be of assistance to us. So those were the main two meetings that we've had so far. We are scheduled to have a third meeting tomorrow to continue our education and learning process. And tomorrow, as I recall, we've got about 100 pages of information that Leonore has circulated to the subcommittee that I hope they all will read by tomorrow. But we continue to we intend to continue our learning and educational process, look at various resources, and now start to drill down on our charge, which is to come up with recommendations of a concrete nature that we want to make to the Issues Committee for further consideration. And so tomorrow we'll be looking at reports and plans and different material that the bars from the states of Arizona, a task force on social justice, bias and inclusion that they put together. We're looking at the recommendations from the Florida State Bar, who went through a similar process that we're charged with. And then we'll look at a very robust report from the state of Oregon. They put together a very ambitious diversity plan. The purpose is to study what those other bars have done, to look at the materials that they assembled, studied, put together, and the reports that they made to their organization. Quite frankly, a lot of this will go to state bars, some state bar councils like ours. I think the Supreme Court in those states has more impact in some instances, but they all went through the process that we're going through now. And we continue to talk with them to study their materials, all designed to come up with a set of written recommendations that we will present to the Issues Committee for further consideration and implementation, ideally. The other thing that we've talked about, which may be within our purview, but it's something that's been put in the room, so we'll take a look at it just so the folks in attendance today know. I'm sure a lot of you, if you are not aware, need to be aware that the Bar Association recently issued a report sort of looking at systemic racism within that organization from a historical perspective. It's been suggested that our subcommittee take a look at whether that is a recommendation to the Issues Committee as well. And we intend to take a look at that as well. So that may be one of the recommendations that we make to the Issues Committee as well, which would be a pretty ambitious study that obviously will have to be approved by the Issues Committee and the officers and the council, quite frankly. So in a nutshell, that's sort of a long-winded description of where we are and where we intend to go. And ideally, if we can drill down and make some concrete decisions, we'd like to make, our report at least by October if possible, but no promises there. So that is the report that I have, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Really do appreciate you and your committee. It's a tough issue, a lot of material out there to look at, and I think you're smart, handling it in a very smart way. Questions for Todd? Comments? Suggestions?
Well, we welcome suggestions.
All right. Well, thank you so much. I do appreciate it, Todd. Good luck.
Thank you.
I look forward to the meeting tomorrow.
All righty.
Okay, so our baby committee that was formed at the last meeting, our report, the secured leave subcommittee. I want to thank Gordon Brown for his willingness to chair that committee, and serving on that committee is Mark Enriquez, Catherine Fry, Dion Fortner, Kevin Kiernan, Walter Brock, Bill Mills, and also Drew. Alice, can you help me with the pronunciation of his name? Ertaschich.
Erdachek.
Drew Erdachek.
Check. Yeah.
Erdachek. He's with Porter Sproul, but he is also a member of the Chief Justice's Commission on Professionalism. And when we attended that meeting, and the Chief Justice asked that Drew serve as a member of this subcommittee, and so we're happy to have Drew. I believe he was actually on the initial secured leave, did a work on the initial secured leave proposals. So anyway, I think you've got a great committee and a great leader, and so I'm going to turn it over to their fearsome leader, Gordon. Fearless leader. Gordon, you with us? Uh-oh.
Gordon sometimes gets dropped off and I don't see him at the moment.
Let's give him a chance to drop back on, come back on. Otherwise, I'm going to have to put one of his committee members on the spot and they're going to all start dropping off like flies, I think, about right now. I'm looking at Dion over there. I see Kevin. I see Catherine.
Marcy, I think also the staff for that committee are on here. That would be
Are they good?
Cameron and Savannah.
That's
Gordon's
right. I
joining.
don't
Gordon's
see it.
joining us right now. He's coming. He's back in here.
I think everybody's now relieved. Gordon, are you with us?
He's looks like yeah.
Okay, is he with us?
Hello.
There you are.
Yeah.
Your
You know how
committee was
shy I
getting
am.
nervous. They were getting nervous. They were going to have to take your place on the fly. So, all right, Gordon, tell us what you guys have been doing.
Well, thank you for that indulgence. I am the beneficiary of a hand-me-down iPad, and this is the last straw. I will have to go expend some funds to make sure it never happens again. We have had 2 meetings since the January council meeting, one on March 12 as a kickoff meeting, and again on April 1, propitiously, to begin the process of what we're trying to do in examining the secured leave policies and rules. We've identified 4 areas of assessment that we would like to focus on for the purposes of our body of work. The first is how well are the current rules working? The second assessment is in what respects can the current rules be improved? The third assessment is, are there any adverse impacts of the rules on the ability of the courts to manage their work? And the fourth item would examine the possibility of extending secured leave to other areas such as with administrative litigation, administrative adjudications. So we've identified those. They're not exclusive. There's plenty of room to look at other areas, but the longer we go with this, we know it'll be harder to add on more work. One of the first things we did is try to identify stakeholders to give us comment and input. We've identified superior and district court judges, appellate court judges, LAP, the AOC, and the OAH, Office of Administrative Hearings. So far, committee member Mel Wright has already instigated a contact with the head of the Conference of Superior Court judges, Drew Erdeshik, who was put on this committee because he actually worked
Have we lost Gordon?
He's still
side
there. He is.
and have access. Hello?
Gordon, we kind of lost you for a moment there.
Okay. What's the last thing anybody remembers I said?
The last thing you were talking about, Drew.
Yes, Drew is he's sort of a twofer because he was around and participated on the committee when the rules were first created. And he's also now the chair of appellate rules and is so can look at it from the appellate side. Barbara Jackson is coming in a couple of months to take his spot, and he's going to liaise with her on that. I asked Darren, the man who never sleeps, to get in touch with Robin Moretis at LAP and see if they had any interest in having someone help us in what we were doing. And as a result of that, Robin nominated Shelley Buckner, formerly a lawyer in Raleigh and is now out in Cherokee. And she's coming on board. I've spoken with her since the last meeting, and I'm sure just talking with her, I can tell she's going to be a great colleague. The AOC has been contacted there and gotten some input. And we've reached out to Judge Julian Mann and haven't heard back from him yet, but we're already starting the process of trying to see what some of the stakeholders or people who would be good spokespersons for stakeholders would have to say. We are also identifying secure leave rules and policies in other jurisdictions. We're starting with those who are considered sister jurisdictions to North Carolina. And in your materials from some of our work, you will see a summary of rules for Virginia and Georgia and Florida. Georgia being the one with the most advanced rules at this point. They're very dissimilar from North Carolina in certain respects, but they have some things in there to think about. You'll find them in the materials that have been printed for the committee at pages 74 and 75. One of the first things we did, and that was have sort of an internal survey of what folks thought about the rules and in what ways they may be butting up against some of these assessment points we wanted to get studied. And I have to thank Savannah for that. It's her idea, and it worked beautifully. We got some insights we didn't know we had right up front. And lest I forget, Cameron Lee has also been a huge help, particularly on the side of looking at policies from other states, but they've both been highly collaborative and very eager to move forward with this work. What Savannah's little idea spawned was an effort to have yet another survey, Madam Chair, and to have it more broad-based and try to find out what those lawyers who tend to use these rules every year think about it. And so we've done some work on that. We started with Savannah's chassis and worked that through and enlarged it. We've got the gang of three, again, Darren, the man who never sleeps, and Catherine Fry and Kevin Kiernan to look it over, add some ideas. And today we have a working draft that's at pages 72 and 73 of the materials that were handed out for the for the Issues Committee. And this working draft is, I think, in pretty good shape. What we wanted to do was to bring this idea back to the Issues Committee and make sure that we had the Issues Committee blessing on the idea of giving a survey, the content of the survey that we have it to date, and or at least everybody get a chance to comment or add things or counsel against it. And we have a proposed scope of distribution of the survey. The obvious choice is North Carolina Bar Association. And I'll come back to that in a minute. The first question is, would it be appropriate to send this survey out to all the state bar counselors? The subcommittee thought so, and State Bar Council, subject to what the Issues Committee might advise, is on that list. In addition, Advocates for Justice, Association of Defense Counsel, or Defense Lawyers, excuse me, Association of Women Attorneys, and Association of Black Lawyers, as also being groups that would be involved with litigation, and that those groups, of course, would also be the major beneficiaries of any changes, or would suffer with some loss of benefits if those changes contracted. But all of those are on that menu. Let me go to the North Carolina Bar Association. With them, they're already organized into sections, and we've identified, I believe, 7 sections that would probably respond to a survey question. Those sections would be litigation, appellate, construction, zoning, planning, and land use, administrative law, domestic, and criminal. That's a very wide group, but there's a lot of adjudicatory process in all of those groups. In addition, there was a thought that it would be fruitful to cast the net a little wider and go after an entire division of the Bar Association. That would be the Younger Lawyers Division. Typically, younger lawyers sometimes get a lot of benefit from these rules, particularly as they've got young families and other things like that. So I've talked with Jason Henley, who's the executive director of the North Carolina Bar Association. Jason has graciously agreed to collaborate with the state bar should it be allowed to happen. And his thought would be simply this: what he would do is get each of the sections or the divisions that we wanted to disseminate the survey to, send them a. Am I off again? Let's see.
No, you're not off.
On. Okay, I'm still on. Good. Yeah. Anyhow, the idea would be to send a request, a notice that the survey's there, what it's to be used for, that it would be for subcommittee purposes. It's nothing mandatory from the state bar. It's going to be on an anonymous basis. We don't want people naming names, because if you look at the list of questions, some of them ask about knowledge or having any information about lawyers ever abusing the rules at times. We don't want names, and that's not our purpose, but we're trying to find out how it gets used for good or for bad. And Jason said all they have to do is send that message out to the listservs for all of those sections, and with a link back to the Survey Monkey that Savannah will set up for us, and also hook into any of these other groups that would be treated in the same similar fashion, and then get the results of the survey. Savannah is the only person, she and Cameron, that can explain to me how all of this works, but she assures me they can then sort the data in a meaningful way, and this would give us a great sense of what people think, how it's working now, what improvements could be made if there are any abuses out there, and we can be better informed as we get through our work. We've set an internal goal to continue our assessment works for May and June. Hopefully we're finished with assessment by July. If not, we finish that in July, and we write the report up and try to have it presented back to the Issues Committee a month ahead of October's meeting in mid-September, so that it can be reviewed and digested, and decisions can be made about any supplemental work if that is necessary. So that's our plan as a group, and all the committee members have been great. Everybody's been responsive. Again, Savannah and Cameron are our fearless leaders, and I hate to brag on them, but you've got the rest of the subcommittees have good staff members, but mine are the best. So anyhow, they're working hard, and hopefully by the time the July meeting comes around, we'll have a lot more information, and we'll have survey results if Madam Chair can convince the executive committee that it's worth it. So are there any questions?
Gordon, is the survey that is in the materials, is it a final product so everybody can look at it?
Everybody can look at it. It is a working draft. It's the 4th generation.
I'm just wondering.
We've had, and we're not going to consider it final till first of all we know it's safe to go forward and act on this as our subcommittee, and people on this committee get an opportunity to have some input into it. So our next meeting is not scheduled yet. We have sent out a poll to get a meeting the week of May 3. So people have a little time to look at it and make changes or suggest changes if they would like to do that.
It sounds to me like it's not quite ready to go to executive committee then for a vote, because I guess.
Well,
we
actually,
have-
if you want to take that survey and show it to them, we feel pretty good about it. We've taken it as far as a subcommittee as we can go.
I guess what I'm saying, and Alice helped me out here, that the executive committee would want to be looking at the exact survey that we're asking for permission to send out.
We're prepared to tender that as the exact survey if they approve it. You know, I didn't know how that would exactly work, but we've worked on it enough. This is the 4th generation, like I said, and I've got approval for it at this stage. So if you want us to delay a little bit, we're happy to do that. We'll take our instructions from y'all, but the first draft was done before the March meeting, and we've had several more iterations since then. And there are not a lot of questions. We think that they address all 4 of the areas we're trying to look at. And we're willing to stand pat on them, but we didn't want to arrogate that into ourselves, you know, because we serve you.
Well, Alice can chime in, but it seems to me that if asking the executive committee to approve a survey, it needs to be they need to see the survey.
Yeah, well, you know, I've looked at the survey and it's in the materials
Right.
that was sent to the issues committee. Gordon, I think if what you think is going to happen is tweaks as opposed to some changes of the content, substantial changes of the content, the thing that I think is important to have the executive committee consider is the kind of putting the name of the state bar on a survey that gets sent out. Either we send it out directly as an email request to all of our membership, or as in this instance, if I'm understanding you correctly, Gordon, we're going to send this to these various organizations and ask them to ask their members to complete it, but it will be identified as a state bar survey. And I think in both those instances, we just want to make sure that it is appropriate for the name of the state bar to be on a survey that we're sending out. So, you know, if there's not going to be substantive, you know, significant substantive changes to the questions as they are, I think approving it conceptually at this stage is fine. If it will move things along, because otherwise I think you're looking at waiting another quarter to perhaps approve, you know, a few additional questions and some tweaks that are all along the lines of the existing survey.
Let me say this, Alice. The important thing, I think, is just keep control over the answers, the data that's generated. And what Jason was saying, and I think it's a very safe way to proceed, is the way it works is the survey is disseminated by the host group, and it'll have the explanation of what it is and why it is and where it's going, and it's anonymous. Then there's a link put in that. You click on the link and it comes back to Savannah. And so when they answer, all the answers come to the state bar, comes to Savannah. She and Cameron have set the controls so that we can't trace it back to a person. You know, it is going to be anonymous. We're just looking at results at that point from the various groups that have that ability. So it will be under the control of the state bar when it comes back. And that's hopefully enough of a safeguard to anybody be apprehensive about it getting out and people using that information, taking it off themselves, shouldn't be able to happen because it will switch all the way over to a protected, a protected account. And there's no, Savannah and Cameron both advised, first of all, we better see how much this costs. It won't cost anything, I know, with the state, with the Bar Association, and you all already have an account with SurveyMonkey, so it's maybe prepaid. So that part's taken care of. The timing of all of this, I would rather not wait until July before having that survey, because I'm trying to get this done so that you've got something very tangible by October. But we will certainly do that if you think if it's better. But we're, like I said, we're willing to stand on the way the survey is written, tweaks that people have. If it's non-substantive, but elicits a better answer, a clearer answer, or takes out an ambiguity, we would certainly like to have leave to be able to do that.
So Alice, would we have copies of both the surveys in the executive committee materials so that, is that how that works?
I think probably it's easier for me to direct the folks on the executive committee to review the documents. They're already on SharePoint. If that's acceptable, Marcy, we can easily do that.
I think they need to know what they're voting on. They're not gonna have a chance to look at the survey if they don't know about it ahead of time. So maybe an email or something to the executive committee.
I will send an email to the executive committee and have links to the documents that they need to look at on SharePoint.
Okay, thank you. All right, good work.
Marcy, we did a vote for the last survey. Do we need to do a vote for this one as well?
Yes, sorry, we need a motion and a second to publish the survey that's in the materials or something very close to it.
So moved.
Is your second?
Second.
Thank you. So we're ready to vote. All right, so that carries 17-0. All right, is there any other business that this committee needs to consider today? If not, is there a motion for us to adjourn? Truly there is.
So move.
I'll second.
Second.
Thank you. All right. Thank you guys. I appreciate everybody's hard work. And I believe Alex